In a world where courage is often measured by physical strength, one boy proved that true bravery comes from the heart. At just 16 years old, Liam Carter had lost the use of his legs in a terrible accident, but what he refused to lose was his spirit. During a grand charity event at a famous wildlife sanctuary, surrounded by hundreds of spectators, Liam made a request that left everyone speechless. He wanted to enter the Lions Arena alone, in his wheelchair. Most believed it was reckless. Some thought it was impossible. But no one was prepared for what happened when Liam rolled into the center of that arena, and a majestic lion approached him. What the lion did next didn't just silence the crowd, it brought them to tears. Before we begin this unforgettable story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single moment of what happens next. For most of his young life, Liam Carter had been known for his boundless energy. He was the kid climbing the highest branches, racing his bike down the steepest hills, and laughing louder than anyone else. But at 14, everything changed. A rainy night, a driver who didn't see the stop sign, and in one tragic moment, Liam's world turned upside down. He woke up in a hospital bed, unable to feel his legs. Doctors called it a miracle that he survived. Liam didn't feel very lucky. He watched life happen from the sidelines: birthdays, school dances, the simple joy of running across a field. All of it felt like a distant memory. But while his legs had failed him, his heart refused to give up. If he couldn't run, he would still find a way to stand tall in the world on his own terms. Liam had always admired lions. To him, they were more than animals. They were living symbols of strength, resilience, and undeniable presence. So, when his mother suggested attending a charity event at the prestigious Wild Spirit Sanctuary, featuring their most famous lion, Baron, the undisputed king of the sanctuary, Liam didn't hesitate, but what shocked everyone was his request. "I don't want to watch from behind a fence," he told the organizers. "I want to meet Baron face to face, in the arena, alone." His mother broke down in tears. The sanctuary's board immediately refused. Too dangerous, too risky, impossible. But when Baron's longtime caretaker, an elderly man named Samuel Whitaker, heard about Liam's request, he said something that silenced the room. "If there's one person who deserves to meet a king, it's a boy who's already conquered his greatest fear." And so, under a brilliant afternoon sun, Liam rolled his wheelchair onto the soft earth of the open enclosure. The crowd held its breath. Cameras flashed. Every eye was locked on the boy who refused to live in fear. Then, the gates creaked open. Baron emerged like a living legend, his golden mane glowing in the sunlight, his muscles rippling beneath his powerful frame. And as his deep amber eyes settled on the small, motionless figure in the center of his domain, the entire world seemed to stop. The sun stood high above the arena, its golden light casting long, sharp shadows across the earth. A tense, almost unbearable silence settled over the crowd as Baron, the undisputed king of the sanctuary, entered the enclosure. Every muscle in the massive lion's body rippled beneath his thick golden mane as he moved forward. His paws barely made a sound against the dusty ground, but his presence commanded the full attention of every soul in the audience. People held their breath. Mothers gripped their children's hands. Liam's mother stood near the edge of the arena, her face pale, her fingers pressed tightly against her lips. And yet, in the middle of that vast open space, Liam Carter sat perfectly still. His wheelchair stood like a solitary monument of defiance amidst a kingdom of wild instinct. The breeze brushed through his dark hair, but his hands remained calm, resting on the arms of his chair. His heart, however, was pounding violently against his ribs. Baron's eyes locked onto Liam from across the enclosure. The lion's deep amber gaze seemed to see straight through the boy's fragile body and into something deeper, something that transcended weakness, fear, or limitation. Slowly, methodically, Baron advanced. Each step felt like an eternity, each movement deliberate and full of meaning. The ground seemed to tremble under his powerful strides. Liam could feel his breath catch in his throat as the lion closed the distance. 5 meters. 3, 1. And then the unimaginable happened. Baron stopped directly in front of Liam, towering over him, his massive head level with the boy's chest. For a long, unbearable second, nothing happened. Liam could feel the lion's hot breath against his skin, hear the low, deep rumble of air moving through the predator's lungs. The crowd remained frozen, eyes wide, breaths held as if the entire world had paused to witness what would come next. Then, in a gesture no one could have predicted, Baron took a slow step closer. He lowered his massive head and pressed it gently against Liam's chest. A collective gasp rose from the stands. Mothers sobbed openly. Grown men wiped tears from their eyes. The great lion, the very symbol of power and dominance, had just offered a bow of submission and trust to a boy who could not even stand. With trembling hands, Liam reached forward and touched Baron's mane. His fingers slid through the coarse, sun-warmed fur, and in that simple contact, a lifetime of pain and limitation seemed to fall away. Baron closed his eyes and released a soft, deep rumble, not a growl of warning, but a sound of comfort, of peace. At that moment, something changed forever. Liam didn't feel like the boy in the chair anymore. He felt stronger than ever before, standing tall in the only way that truly mattered. And before him knelt not just a lion, but a living symbol that sometimes true strength isn't found in muscles or movement, but in the courage to face your fears head on. The sun continued its slow descent, casting a golden halo over the arena as if the heavens themselves were paying tribute to the moment unfolding below. Liam remained motionless, his hand trembling gently against Baron's warm mane. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he couldn't do. He was entirely present in what he was doing. And at that moment, that was enough to make him feel invincible. Baron stayed close, his massive head resting lightly against Liam's chest. His breathing was calm, steady, his eyes closed as if he, too, was finding peace in that rare connection. Around them, the crowd could no longer contain their emotions. Grown men who prided themselves on their toughness wiped away tears with the backs of their hands. Mothers clutched their children tighter, whispering to them to remember what they had just witnessed for the rest of their lives. On the upper balconies, event organizers and sanctuary officials stood in stunned silence. Samuel Whitaker, the sanctuary's oldest and most respected lion handler, had tears welling in his weathered eyes. In all his decades working alongside the great beasts of the wild, he had never seen a lion act with such tenderness, especially not toward a stranger, and certainly not toward a human who appeared physically vulnerable. "This," Samuel whispered under his breath, his voice cracking, "this is something the world will never forget." Back in the arena, Baron slowly lifted his head and gazed deeply into Liam's eyes. It was as if he understood the weight of the boy's struggles, the silent battles fought in hospital beds, the nights spent wishing for just one moment of freedom. And in that shared gaze, something unspoken passed between them. A promise. Without warning, Baron turned away from Liam and walked slowly to the center of the arena. He stood tall, his golden mane illuminated by the setting sun. Then, with a deep breath that seemed to draw in the entire horizon, he let out a roar so powerful, so resonant, that it echoed far beyond the sanctuary walls. It wasn't a roar of dominance. It was a declaration of freedom, of peace, of unity between two worlds that had always stood apart. The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Thunderous applause mixed with sob and cheers. But amidst the noise, Liam sat quietly, his eyes never leaving the lion who had just changed his life forever. At that moment, Liam understood something he had never fully grasped before. He might never walk again, but he had just done something far more important. He had stood tall in the heart of a lion's arena. and a king had bowed before him. Long after the crowd had dispersed, and the last echoes of Baron's monumental roar had faded into the twilight, Liam remained in the arena. His mother stood nearby, her face still streaked with tears, unwilling to interrupt the sacred silence surrounding her son. For Liam, time felt suspended. The events of the past hour played over and over in his mind. The slow approach of the great lion, the unimaginable moment when that majestic head pressed gently against his chest, and that final earth-shaking roar that seemed to release every ounce of pain he had carried since his accident. He had come into the arena in a wheelchair, but he was leaving it as someone reborn. Samuel Whitaker approached carefully, his boots crunching softly against the earth. The old lion handler knelt beside Liam, his weathered face lined with emotion. "Young man," Samuel said gently, "I've spent my entire life among lions. I've seen them at their most fierce and their most gentle. But what I witnessed today, I've never seen anything like it. You didn't just meet a lion today, you met a king. And that king chose you." Liam swallowed the lump rising in his throat. His hands trembled, but it wasn't from fear or weakness. It was the overwhelming realization that, for the first time in years, he had become part of something greater than himself. As the sanctuary staff guided him gently back to his mother's side, the crowd outside waited. But they weren't waiting to see a spectacle anymore. They were waiting for a hero. And when Liam appeared at the entrance, still in his chair but holding his head high, the crowd erupted into a wave of applause so loud it seemed to shake the earth all over again. But nothing could prepare Liam for what came next. At the far end of the sanctuary, standing tall against the deepening sky, Baron appeared once more. His silhouette framed by the last light of day, his golden mane catching the final rays of the setting sun. With a slow, deliberate motion, Baron raised his head and let out one final roar, a sound that carried not just across the sanctuary, but through every heart that heard it. And in that moment, Liam understood something that would shape his future forever. True strength isn't measured by how high you can stand, but by how deeply you can inspire others to rise. The video of Liam and Baron's encounter spread across the world in a matter of hours. By morning, it had become the most viewed story online, broadcast on every major news channel, shared on every social platform. People from every corner of the globe were captivated by the sight of a paralyzed teenager facing the king of beasts and earning his respect with nothing but quiet courage. But for Liam, this sudden fame wasn't about the headlines. It wasn't about becoming a symbol. It was about proving to himself and now to millions that his life didn't end the day he lost the ability to walk. The media called it the day a lion bowed to a kingless crown. Within days, Liam began receiving letters from people living with disabilities, from children in hospitals, from veterans who had lost limbs and struggled with their own silent battles. One letter stood out more than the rest. It came from a young girl named Emma, who had also survived a devastating car accident. She wrote, "Before I saw you, I was afraid to leave my house. I thought my life was over, but when I saw you with that lion, I realized I'm still alive. And I can be brave too. Thank you, Liam." Tears welled in Liam's eyes as he read the letter. That's when he knew his journey wasn't just about healing his own heart. It was about giving others the courage to heal theirs. With Samuel Whitaker's help, Liam and his mother launched a new initiative called Lionheart, a global movement dedicated to empowering people living with physical disabilities. The Foundation's first major event, bringing children with disabilities to the Wild Spirit Sanctuary to meet the animals, not from behind fences, but up close, just as Liam had done. And on the day of the first event, something incredible happened. As the children gathered nervously near the viewing platforms, Baron appeared at the edge of the sanctuary. Though wild and free, he approached calmly, his powerful body moving with the grace and confidence of a true king. And just like that unforgettable day with Liam, Baron lowered his massive head, this time before a group of children who had spent too long believing they were defined by their limits. For every child who touched his mane, for every tear that fell and every smile that bloomed, a new story began. And somewhere deep within the sanctuary, under the African sky, the king's final roar that night echoed a message that needed no translation. You are stronger than you think, and you too can stand tall, whether on two legs or from a chair. Months turned into years, but the memory of that day remained as vivid as ever. Liam Carter had become more than a symbol. He became a movement, a living reminder that true courage doesn't come from standing tall, but from rising above what tries to hold you down. The Lionheart Foundation grew beyond anyone's expectations. Rehabilitation centers around the world adopted its message. Schools shared Liam's story with their students, and every year, on the anniversary of that unforgettable moment in the arena, people gathered to celebrate what became known as Lionheart Day, a day dedicated to overcoming fear, breaking barriers, and standing proud against the impossible. But for Liam, one final chapter remained unwritten. He had to say goodbye to the one who had given him back his life, Baron. The great lion had grown older, his mane touched with silver, but his spirit remained unbroken. Liam returned to the sanctuary on a quiet morning, the same way he had entered years before, his wheelchair rolling steadily across the familiar earth, his heart pounding with emotions too big for words. At the top of the hill, under the shade of the great acacia tree, Baron stood waiting. At the top of the hill, under the shade of the great acacia tree, Baron stood waiting. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, everything fell silent. Just as it had that first day. Liam wheeled closer, reaching out his hand. Baron stepped forward with the same majestic grace, lowering his massive head once more. A final, gentle touch. Tears welled in Liam's eyes as he leaned forward and whispered, "Thank you for making me believe again." As if he understood, Baron lifted his head to the sky and let out one final powerful roar. It echoed across the sanctuary, across the hearts of everyone who had gathered, and far beyond into the lives of people who had been changed forever by a lion's quiet mercy and a boy's unshakable courage. That night, under a blanket of stars, Baron passed peacefully beneath the acacia tree, his legacy eternal. But his story lived on in every child who found the courage to live boldly, in every adult who dared to dream again, and in every roar of hope that rose from the darkest moments of despair. And so, the boy who had entered the arena in a wheelchair walked taller than anyone ever could, not with his legs, but with a heart that had learned to run free. If this story touched your heart, remember, true strength is not measured by how high we stand, but by how deeply we inspire others to rise. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who needs to believe again. Together, we can keep roaring louder than fear.